Oh, we're live. Okay. I was like, I have to look up. So we're live. Welcome to Parade to the Polls. Today, we will be interviewing a host of candidates for Orange County sheriffs. So first, before we get into everything, I want to let everybody know that Parade to Polls is a nonpartisan. We are not endorsing any candidate. We're just encouraging our followers to stay informed and to vote. Also, we're going to take the pledge today. Joe, I'm going to take the pledge. You're going to take the pledge. All the other candidates are going to take the pledge to Parade to the Polls. So I'll go over that shortly. And all of the Orange County Sheriff candidates did agree today to be interviewed. Unfortunately, John Mina could not be present, but he will pop in onto next week's interview. So I want to hop into it. Hello, Joe, Mr. Joe Lopez, who is running for Orange County Sheriff. How are you doing today?
Good, Brittany. Hi, how are you? Glad to be here, everybody.
Good. I'm glad too, just because right now with voting happening and it being so important, especially even today is the last day to register to vote. And I've called 3 or 4 times to make sure that I'm good for August 18th. But I think it's important that we have platforms like this for us to be able to teach others and educate others, and even those that can't necessarily register right now, but you know, this will be coming a day and time that they'll be able to register. So I'm excited to be able to do this interview with all of you, just so that we can keep pushing the initiative of the importance of voting and why to vote. But I want to start off with the first question. There actually are no Republicans running in the Orange County Sheriff's race. Why do you think that is?
Well, there was one that filed to run as a Republican, but he dropped out just before qualifying. And I think there's a Republican write-in. In last election, there was a Republican candidate, but he dropped out also the last minute. And I spoke to him. I haven't spoke to any of the other ones here now. I spoke to him when he dropped out because he did call me to tell me that he was dropping out. And he told me that he wasn't getting any support. He couldn't raise any funds. He said it was very challenging to get that type of support in Orange County. So I'm going to base that. I don't follow the political science behind everything, but on what he told me, I'm thinking it's because they're not going to be able to get any support.
Yeah, and I noticed with running a campaign, and this is just generalized across whatever you're running for, it's a lot of work that you have to put in to get endorsements and get people behind you and rally behind your cause. I mean, have there been anything challenging for your campaign that you've seen, or is this your first time running?
No, this is my second time. My first time was in 2018. The challenge is it's a big county. That's the biggest challenge. I love talking to people. I love being in the streets. I knock on doors. I've been everywhere in this community, and I still got more work to do. So that's probably the biggest challenge. Oh, and the second challenge is I worked a 40 to 60 hour full-time job. I have my own business for the last 2 years. I have a family, and I got a campaign. So that's probably the second biggest challenge. But all that means there's a reason for all that stuff. But that's
right.
It's a big county and trying to get to everybody.
Right. Well, can you describe to us your background in like law enforcement?
Yeah, so I'm a retired chief with the Florida Highway Patrol. 32 years I served with the Highway Patrol. I moved here to Orlando in 2005 for a promotion to lieutenant. My last assignment was I was in command of the state troopers here in Orlando. So I've done things from investigations, internal affairs, cargo theft, identity theft, police shootings, working on a violent street crime task force, emergency management, to running the mobile field force. I traveled to Cleveland. I traveled to Tampa for the Republican National Convention. I was on the stories of the Highway Patrol, 5 segments, which is like equivalent to cops. So that's in 32 years. I mean, there's a lot more, but I think we only got a few minutes.
No, for sure. I mean, what do you think is are good qualities for the sheriff position? What are some good qualities that you think that person that gets the position should possess?
Well, number one, you got to have integrity. All right. When you have integrity, people want to mirror that. So
right.
That's one of the biggest things. When I was in command at the Florida Highway Patrol, half of my career, you know, I would get feedback and I would ask people, what is it you're looking for in a effective leader? You know, people could be leaders, but an effective leader is through your leadership skills and making sure that you get things done. So integrity is probably the most important thing. And I think when you got integrity, you got what? You got professionalism. When you got professionalism, you got discipline. So self-discipline and also discipline overall. But those are the most important things, because I think the people in the community, they're looking for somebody who's transparent. When you got integrity, you're transparent, because it's all about the communications and it's about shining light on what's going on, not stuff that's hidden behind the scenes or things that people can't look at and later on they question and there's a doubt and it puts a doubt in it.
Right. Well, what made you want to run for sheriff?
Well, 45 plus years, I've been serving my community as a state trooper, United States Marine, Boy Scout, Cub Scout, naval.
So you in the game.
Yeah. I mean, God put me on earth for a purpose. To me, it's been a calling. It's been a sense of duty. Even though I retired 4 years ago, I got a full-time job. I really don't need this job. I got a very good paying job, but it's a calling. I don't think that my purpose here has been totally fulfilled. It's a calling, and people have asked me, local leaders have asked me to do something, because what we're seeing right now is some very challenging times between the law enforcement and the community has eroded. And I'm the only person who can bring that, because I'm willing to work with people who are different from me. So I think I'm a bridge maker. I'm not a divider, and I hate the divisiveness. Our county and our country is divided right now. And I think it's going to take somebody who has the emotional intelligence to bring people together.
Oh, I love that. I love that. I want you to tell me, what were your initial reactions in hearing the recent stories of racial injustice, such as the Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor? What were some of your thoughts that circled around those situations?
Well, when it comes to the George Floyd, obviously it was on video, right? So everybody saw it, and I was floored. I was disgusted, sick to my stomach that we saw a modern day lynching. Okay, we saw a murder. Nobody in your lifetime, okay, even some police officers will go their whole career without seeing somebody dead.
Mm-hmm.
But we saw the actual murder on TV. Okay, it wasn't a movie; it was real. So to see that, and who knows how many people that's going to affect down the road, and to find out that we still have that going on, such racism in our country, and it just floors me. Breonna Taylor, I was also floored because I've been on SWAT for 17 years. And from what I understand, of course, I haven't dived into the details, but they went to the wrong house. They went inside. She was in the bed, and they came in and shot her. I mean, I don't know. I mean, that's what stuff we hear in communist countries. You know, right. This is a free country. My parents are from Cuba. So I've heard the stories of, what they do in those communist countries, and I couldn't believe that we still have that. And how long did it take for the local officials to take action against those police officers? How could you come in there in a house and basically murder somebody who didn't put up a resistance? So I think we've been set back in community relations for 25 years. Everything that we have done for all these years that we built has been set back for 25 years, a whole generation. And the young generation right now looking, they're getting some very bad opinions, very bad feelings about law enforcement. So it's going to take the good cops, because there's a lot of good law enforcement officers. It's only a small percentage of the 700,000 police officers nationwide. A small percentage has tarnished our badge. And regardless of the shape of the badge, the color of the uniform, it tarnished all of us. But it's going to take the good ones to really work harder to bridge that gap and build that relationship again.
Right. It looks like we have a question from Lisa. It looks like she says, what do you think is going right in the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and what is going wrong, and what immediate changes would you make?
Well, what I know is going right is that there's a lot of good deputies that want to do the right thing. Not one deputy I've heard has accepted the fact what happened in Minneapolis was correct. So at least we got that. And we're seeing from the statements from the recent survey from the FOP. I don't know if you heard about this, but the members of the Orange County Sheriff's Office who are members of the FOP have conducted a survey not supporting their leadership. And there's a lot of comments in there. I read this 46 pages in there. And there's a lot of good comments in there about saying how the leadership that they can't trust anymore because they lost the confidence in the leadership. So we know these deputies want to do the right thing. What's gone wrong is that I believe that there's still a systemic problem, whether we have a picture of people of systemic racism, and this county has grown immensely. What is it? Yeah, 1,500 people moving to Orange County every week. So the population here is very diverse. Okay, in Miami, I lived in New York. It's the same thing that I'm seeing. So the Hispanic population, the African American population is growing. So we know that the Hispanic population, which is 32% of Orange County, and the whites is 39% of Orange County. You know, the Hispanics is the largest Hispanic minority, and then African Americans come in second. So if, with those two combined, they make up the majority of the population. The Orange County Sheriff's Office doesn't reflect those demographics. Okay, so one thing wrong, as you asked me, is that we need to make sure that Orange County Sheriff's Office reflects the demographics of the county, because I just mentioned 39% are white in Orange County. Okay, that's the population. But 63% in Orange County Sheriff's Office are what? White. Where we only have 19% are, 19% in Orange County Sheriff's Office are Hispanic, and 13% African American. So we need to change that. So the community, so we can start building relationships with the community and bringing those barriers down.
I love that. I love that. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today. And you're not going quite yet. We're going to have a panel discussion at the end of all this. But definitely thank you for giving us some of your insight on what you think. And good luck. Definitely. The election is coming up. It's August 18th. If you are not registered to vote, make sure that you get registered. Today is the last day to register. And I did find out that you can go to your local library and they can take your voter registration card right there for you. So I'll see you in a few minutes.
Yes.
I have more to come on the way. I have Eric McIntyre joining me shortly with more questions. If you guys have questions, make sure that you drop them in the chat so that we can make sure that everybody knows. And also, like I said, make sure that you get registered to vote. Today is the last day to register to vote. I did find out that if you are under the age of 18, that you can still pre-register to vote. And when you become of age, they will automatically switch you over to be an active voter. I was getting all the voter information today to make sure that I was registered myself. But do make sure that you register to vote. It is very important that we parade to the polls. I have Eric McIntyre coming up next. And I'm your girl, Brittany Elise. Uh-oh, my friend Eric, I think you're on mute.
I am indeed. I didn't know if he was ready or not. McIntyre.
McIntyre. I wanted to make sure I got it right. I was all wrong. I owe you one. I owe you one.
Yeah, you're fine. You're fine. Eric is just fine. You got that right. Eric, just call me Eric.
Eric, how are you doing today?
Wonderful, wonderful.
Now, Eric, I wanted to start off by asking you, why do you think that there are no Republicans running in the Orange County Sheriff's race? And why do you think that that is?
Oh, that sounds like a trick question to me. It really does. It really does. And I want to keep this on the straight and narrow. So here's what I see. Republicans may not be running in Orange County because Orange County is a strong Democrat county. Okay. And just so that you'll know, many candidates, it's not unusual for candidates to be a Republican and then change their party affiliation just to be elected, as opposed to just being who they are and being elected by the citizens based on their initiatives, their policy, and based on who they really are. So that's not unusual. So in light of not bringing up who was a Republican before being a Democrat, I'll just say the reason being is that some people may not think that they stand a chance because they don't believe that voters would make the right choice in choosing the right person. They just want to hop on the Democrat bandwagon. And I've been a Democrat all my adult life when I was at 18. So I haven't changed. I haven't found the need to change. I figure whatever I am is what I am, and people are going to vote based on who you are.
And you know, when as you were saying that, I'm thinking like when I was 18 and I first could vote, I would go in there and I just hit Democrat all the way down. Like a lot of people just hit that Republican all the way down. They don't even research, they don't read. And that's why I'm glad we have platforms like this today so we can educate ourselves on the candidates and what are some of the initiatives that they want to put forward. That way we make the right decision when we parade to the polls. But I could see your point, because if there's a lot of people like me that were going in there and just hitting that Democrat all the way down, but I really agreed with something that this Republican might have been saying, they wouldn't get my vote because I was just taking the easy way out and not educating myself on it. Can you describe to us your background in law enforcement?
Over the years, my law enforcement background, I have at least 20 years of law enforcement experience, and the other years were pre-law enforcement. That's why I combined the years, about 30 years of legal and law enforcement experience. And I've been able to work within various communities. I've been a mentor, a volunteer for Orange County schools and through city programs. So my experience, also life experience. Mm-hmm. I'm 49 years old, have a birthday at the end of the month.
Oh, happy birthday. That makes you a Leo.
Indeed. Without elaboration, yes. Strong, with courage. Yes. Not like the Wizard of
Oz. So what are some of the things that you see, if appointed to the position, what are some of the things that you would bring in to being the Orange County Sheriff?
And since I first became interested in becoming the sheriff of Orange County, I did find that people are in need of people with experience in the law enforcement arena to not make people afraid of law enforcement. And you'll find in many of the neighborhoods, even when I grew up in the downtown area of Orlando, the inner city, I had interactions with law enforcement, and being a law enforcement agency, I tell you a funny thing. When I used to go to these training classes, I'll sit around and say, "Oh man, all these cops!" And I realized, like, okay, I still have a little bit of that in me, right. which now, as a law enforcement officer, when I'm treated in the neighborhood as, "Man, y'all police, y'all this," I'm like, oh, so now I see the other side of the spectrum. Now I see the other side of this, the spectrum of what it's like to be a law enforcement officer. And what I would bring to the sheriff's office is a morale booster. I would bring the fact that everything that you do doesn't necessarily warrant a large amount of discipline, but at the same time, when you intentionally commit an act, that's called premeditation, and therefore and you know, a reason you should know that it's a criminal act, and I believe you should be dealt with accordingly. And the other thing is, my main focus is community policing, bringing officers inside of the neighborhood so that they can meet the people in the neighborhood, so that they'll know the names of the people in the neighborhood, as well as the people in the neighborhood knowing who they are. And that's like getting out of the cars. We really don't see that a lot anymore. And I believe we can do a lot more crime solving, a lot more interaction with our youth, so that they'll see that there's other activities that they can engage in, and the officers can engage in them with them. We can take away the grandmas taking care of the kids, and the moms, the single parents having to work 2 jobs, and law enforcement either checking on them or giving them a place to go just to keep them out of trouble. And that's one of my primary, but the whole platform in its entirety is aimed at protecting victims of domestic violence, protecting the elderly and children from abuse and from abuse. A lot of that is going on, and people we're not realizing it. There's been an upward trend of homicides over the past 2 years, and it seemed like it's been ignored. And what my function and platform is to reduce the amount of crime and reduce the amount of homicides within our community, and work with other cities that encompasses Orange County to assist in my community program initiatives and to help to reduce crime and the fear of crime.
I like that. I can remember growing up and there being officer friendly when I was young, and they used to call him Officer Friendly, and I knew who Officer Friendly was. He would show up at the school, he'd be in the neighborhood, and it was just it was definitely a large morale that when he would come around, all the kids would get so excited. And now it's like I fear for the kids that are growing up that don't have that same interaction that I had when I was growing up. Well, I want to know, what were your initial reactions in hearing the recent stories of racial injustice, such as Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, and Breonna Taylor?
It just seemed like, even though there was a heightened thing that's going on, even during the George Floyd incident, it's like things were still happening. It's like someone didn't sit somebody down and say, chill out.
Right.
And the way I see it, in the rank and file system, you have to know who your leader is, and you have to follow and be as the leader would have you to be. For example, if you're on a hiking trail, you follow where the leader is going. It says, hey, don't touch this type of plant, don't do that. I would think that in the community, as a law enforcement agency, when you see that we don't have time to play, we're here to serve the people, and we're here to render justice, and we need to do it fairly, and we need to do it with restraint. And that's what I believe that I can bring to law enforcement in the law enforcement agency of the sheriff's office, by allowing for officers to de-escalate other officers as well, including supervisors, without any type of repercussions, and learn de-escalation techniques, as well as be able to put them through some form of psychological training to psychological training, together with having evaluations on a regular basis when other officers see that this person might not be having a good day or have too much stress that's going on in their personal life that may also reflect their job.
Well, Eric, I thank you for joining us today. I wish you lots of luck in this race. I appreciate you for talking to us. And you're not quite going just yet, because once we get through all the candidates, we're going to take the pledge. So I'll see you shortly.
Okay, thank you very much for your time, and I appreciate you having me.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Next up, ladies and gentlemen, I have Andrew Darling. And remember, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them in the chat. We're able to see them, and we'll make sure that we get them going. Oh, I don't have Andrew. I have Daryl Shepard. Daryl, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Perfect. Nice meeting you. Virtual social distance meeting.
I'm used to it. It's very nice to meet you as well.
Well, I want to hop right in. You're running for Orange County Sheriff. You're a candidate that's in the race for August 18th. I want to make sure I get the dates right. I want to know, what are some of the things that you want to bring to the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
Well, I think it desperately needs trust. We need to restore the trust that we should have between the citizens and the deputies. We need some transparency. I think that, there's a lot of moving parts that the citizens don't get to see, or is being done behind the scenes and intentionally held back from the citizens. So therefore they can control the type of response they get. So, I think those are one of the, or two of the very important things that we need, as well as bringing the citizens back into the fold, so to speak, and bringing them into our law enforcement societies and communities. So having a strong community review board is another very important issue that I have, that I want to make sure that the citizens have the ability to affect real change at the time, not after the fact, or getting information that's watered down, so to speak, and then dealing with that kind of situation. So there's a lot of things that we have to face today, especially with the ongoing issues with Black and Brown communities being disenfranchised or negatively affected by our law enforcement. I think that the perception needs to change, and we have a lot of work to do when it comes to that.
Now, can you describe to us your background in law enforcement?
I don't have a lengthy background in law enforcement. When I was in college, I did go to the police academy. I graduated from one of the top police academies in the state. Passed my Florida certification exam for an officer, so I was eligible to work within any state agency or any agency at that time. I did some reserve work with a smaller agency, but law enforcement at the time, it seemed like it was a lot better. So I chose to go into business and other things that was a better decision for my family financially at that time. So fast forward to today, it doesn't mean I didn't have a great respect and affinity for the law enforcement community. I just did not choose a career. And I don't think that should have penalized me in any way going forward to today. I have the basic training and knowledge that any other law enforcement officer would have. And I bring that knowledge with my business management leadership skills to the sheriff's office and to that position. But I have not been a career law enforcement officer for 30 years. Had I been a career law enforcement with management, roles such as chief of police or sheriff, I guarantee there would have been some changes.
Now, with that being said, what is the light bulb moment, or what is the reason why you wanted to run for this particular position?
Well, in 2018, I clearly saw systemic problems when you looked at the marijuana arrest and the overcriminalization of our youth and Black and brown people, and just the unfair treatment. It was almost as if you would have a scenario if you couldn't afford legal representation or legal defense, then you were mistreated. You were treated as, oh, you're too poor, so therefore we can do whatever we want to you, and you don't have the means to fight back. And I'm all for fighting for those who can't fight for themselves. So and I feel like in our communities with our Black and brown communities, a lot of times we'll get out of say the poverty situation, quote unquote, the hood or whatnot, and we'll become successful, and then we'll forget about all the people that we leave behind, and we'll live our lives and do all kinds of things. And for a while there, I was kind of focused on being successful and doing just that. But I think that I was allowed and smart enough to be able to take a look at that and say, hey, I can give back. And I think this was a great opportunity, given my law enforcement connections in college and early on with the Explorers program, ROTC. I still feel a connection to law enforcement. I think I can do something to make some changes that are very important to us today.
Okay. Now, what were your initial reactions in hearing the recent stories of racial injustice, like George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery? The list continues to go on. What were some of your initial reactions with some of these current situations that are still happening in 2020?
So I think, again, in 2018, I was the first one to fight for criminal justice reform. And, I'm still in the fight. I still believe that had I been elected sheriff during that time, or had we taken some of the issues I was running on and created better relationships with our communities, changed and enhanced transparency, the body cameras respected, had we had a strong community review board, they would have felt like they had an avenue other than having to protest in the ways that they did to get some real change. I think those situations that you described were serious situations that resulted in obviously deaths and things like that. And that's just unacceptable. It should never have gotten to that point. And then the reaction, a lot of people don't feel like they're held accountable. They feel like maybe or hopefully, they will. I see a lot of questions popping up, so I don't know if I should answer those or continue. There's two.
You can continue. I'll tap in.
Okay.
To make sure we get some of those in.
Okay. So I felt like those were unacceptable situations. And a lot of times, you'll have police officers that have this blue curtain mentality that they feel like they need to back that type of behavior up. And that's what led us here to situations like that today with Mr. Lloyd, or Floyd. It was an escalation of systemic issues that have been going on for many, many years. And I believe had those officers previously been held accountable, then, people would feel like, okay, if the officer does something that's improper, they're going to get the proper punishment. But those conditions don't exist in law enforcement today. And usually a chief of police or a career law enforcement officer is going to always, as you've seen on camera with a lot of them, so they're always going to back up that type of behavior and then try to, use smoke and mirrors to say, well, I'm going to refer it out to another agency such as Florida Department of Law Enforcement. Well, there are more cops, so they're going to probably back up the investigations and other things that the previous agency had. So you really just get this whirlwind of nothing. So until you put someone in office that is going to not be beholden to that blue curtain mentality and actually affect real accountability and change, we're going to keep getting the same results.
Right. Now, it looked like that last question from Aston pretty much said, do you think that law enforcement officers should have more training and qualifications, including a 2-year degree? That the data shows that by having that degree, a lot of them have less disciplinary complaints and things of that nature.
Yes, and I think a lot of agencies, I want to say, including the Orlando Police Department, they already have a policy that, basic as a minimum requirement, you would need a 2-year degree. And I believe that is the more education, the better. So I absolutely believe that that's a minimum threshold. If someone comes in with a bachelor's degree or more, we should pay them more. We should give them incentives because there's so many other options that they could choose besides law enforcement. And in the same way that I did back in college, I chose another route because it was financially a better decision for me and my family. So I feel like we have to be competitive when it comes to, pay and salary to bring those education or those with higher education onto the agency.
Okay. Well, Daryl, I want to thank you and I wish you lots of luck in this race. I want to remind everybody that today is the last day to register to vote in the primaries on August 18th. So make sure that you are getting that information in and that paperwork in. And I'll see you in a little bit.
All
we
right.
have a panel discussion.
I had a great time.
Next up, I have Andrew Darling coming to the virtual platform. I would say the stage, but we are on a virtual platform today. I definitely want to say shout out to Parade to the Polls for having this. Hello, Andrew.
How are you, Brittany?
Good. How are you?
I am enjoying life right now. Life is amazing.
Listen, I see you on all the social platforms. I seen you on Twitter earlier. You on Instagram. You're getting all this socialness in.
Trying to.
Well, I want to hop right in it, and I want to start with what makes you qualified to run for this position?
So I'm a small business owner. I'm a husband. I'm a father. I'm also the only attorney in this race. So oftentimes folks talk about, law enforcement and their history in being a career police officer, and they focus on the enforcement part. It's also critical that we have somebody in office who actually understands the law, because if law enforcement is not following the law, then the criminals who actually commit these violent crimes, who are actually a danger to the community, they're going to continue to get away with those things if law enforcement isn't following the law.
So do you have any background in law enforcement, or your whole career path has been being an attorney?
So I'm a 7.5-year United States Army veteran. I spent 2 combat tours in Iraq. I was a drill sergeant for a couple years. So while I do not have law enforcement experience, my time in the military, I did have to make those terrible shoot or don't shoot decisions. I had to make decisions related to life and death. So I definitely understand and I respect the positions that some of our law enforcement officers are in sometimes. But the reality of the situation is, in the vast majority of the shootings that we see publicly, if that had been a service member in a foreign country and they'd made the same decision, they would be in jail right now.
Okay. Well, there are no Republicans in the Orange County Sheriff's race. Why do you think that is?
The numbers aren't there for them to win. Orange County is a really blue county. We are very heavily Democratic. And, this race in particular, this race is going to be about reform. I am the only candidate here who is going to be capable of bringing the types of reforms to the Orange County Sheriff's Office that we need. You have a bunch of insiders, and then you have an outsider. And the Orange County Sheriff's Office is on fire right now. The deputies don't trust the current sheriff. The community doesn't trust the current sheriff. And I'm the only person from the outside who also is from here. Like, I grew up here. I'm an Oak Ridge High School graduate. Like, this is home for me. So I'm the only person that's going to be able to bridge that gap between the community and law enforcement.
Now, with all the social injustice, unrest, and a lot of things happening just in our country, period, what are some of your thoughts or even reactions when you heard about like the Ahmaud Arbery, the George Floyd, the Breonna Taylor, the list just, it continues. It's almost to a point where I know for like older people in my family, they always look at it and they're just like, we've seen this for years now. I don't know when it's going to change. And now we're in decades later, generations later, and it's still happening. So what is some of your reaction to that?
So I've been to probably 24 protests at this point. I was at the murderer's home. He had a second home in Windermere. I was there when the protest started there. And I got to thinking, in my position, with my skill set, what could I do, right, to help people? Because that's, at the end of the day, like, what do you use the skills that you have and how do you use them to make an impact on this society? And I offered my law firm services pro bono to any peaceful protester who was arrested in any of the protests. We represented nearly 20 people, and every last one of those cases was dismissed. So wow. I didn't make a dime off of any of the disorderly conduct charges. I represented folks, reached out to the city attorney, and every last one of the cases for peaceful protesters was dismissed.
Wow. We need a lot of change agents in not only our community, but just, I'd say globally, but our country definitely needs a lot of change agents. What is some of the change that you want to bring to the Orange County Sheriff's Office?
Yeah, so there's actually a question right now where it talks about in the past about me giving the Citizens Review Board more teeth, and then talking about there's a state Supreme Court case that says that can't be done. How will I change that? So that is actually a perfect question for this. So the only way that you bring trust into the sheriff's office is by bringing the community and their voice into the sheriff's office. The way that I changed the current law is that law was actually set in a case called Jerry Demings versus the Civilian Review Board. It happened in 2009, and it went all the way up to the Florida Supreme Court. Then Sheriff, now Mayor, Jerry Demings, was on the side of the officer saying that the Civilian Review Board did not have subpoena power. They could not require the deputy to come in and testify. So the Supreme Court affirmed that the police officer and correctional officer Bill of Rights is the only and sole method for officer disciplinary actions. The way that we change that is on day one, I install a Civilian Review Board. As soon as we have an instance of complaint of excessive use of force or anything else, they send a subpoena to a deputy. When that deputy refuses to show up because the controlling case law says they don't have to, I, as the sheriff, am going to move sides. So Sheriff Demings and the sheriff's office was on the side of the deputy. I am going to move sides and be on the side of the Civilian Review Board, and I am going to immediately task my legal department at the sheriff's office to file suit to change that law. It wasn't Jerry Demings in his personal role as Jerry Demings. It was the office of the sheriff, and that is the office that I will hold here in a couple months. And when I hold that office, I am going to change that position, and that should be enough to get the Florida Supreme Court to rehear it and hopefully overturn that law.
It looks like we have a question in from Aston. It says, in the state of Florida, school resource officers are required. Orange County has one of the highest juvenile arrest rates in the state. How can we help improve the role of school resource officers to be more effective in helping our school and reducing this number?
Yeah, so Aston's absolutely right. The statewide average of youth arrests, which means youth who are eligible for an alternative to arrest, which basically means young people who are eligible to get a ticket, a summons, a notice to appear, something that is not physically being arrested and taken into custody. The statewide average is 62% of those who are eligible get that alternative. They don't get arrested. In Orange County, only 35% of students get that alternative, 35% of youth, which means that 65% of youth who are eligible for an alternative. The most serious charge that's going to make you maybe or maybe not eligible for an alternative is like something with your parent, where it's classified as domestic violence, but it may be, a young person's parent took their phone and then they went to grab the phone back. Well, because that's part of your parent's hand, that's a battery, it's domestic violence. But we're arresting in 2019, Sheriff Mina's full year as sheriff, we arrested 65% of youth who were eligible for an alternative to arrest. So how do we fix that in schools? In schools, we have our deputies in professional attire, not their standard work gear. We need to have deputies who are in their khaki pants, their school color polo shirt, and they are part of the staff. They are part of the fabric of that school. They are also not going to be an extension of Orange County Public Schools disciplinary system. So if the school decides or deems that it is something that the child has deserved arrest, right? Something that serious, they're going to need to call an outside deputy to come in, because the damage that it does to the credibility and the trust of a school resource officer when other kids see that officer or see that deputy arresting one of their classmates, that cannot be understated. Like, right. They are not there. Deputies are in our school because state law mandates it, because in the absolute worst case scenario, we want to have a deputy there to help protect our youth. We cannot have our school resource officers. Yes, they're there if there's a fight and they need to break it up. Yes, they're there if something happens where, there's an interaction with a teacher and, there needs to be, somebody needs to separate. I get that. That's what they're there for. But the greatest thing that we're not utilizing them for right now is the relationships that they can build with young people that will allow the rest of the deputies to build trust in the community, which is the number one deficiency at the sheriff's office right now.
No, I love that. I want to thank you for joining us today, Andrew, getting your points across. And I think right now it's almost time for us to have a whole panel discussion. So sit tight for about a minute. All and right. I'm going to get my production team to whip up something so that we all can be on here together.
I'm with you.
Thank you so much.
All right. I appreciate you guys having me.
It's time for the group chat. Thanks, Parade to the Polls. So make sure that you guys are all registered to vote. Today is the last day. I cannot stress that enough, to get out there and just make sure that we're parading to the polls. It's seeking change by being able to vote. I think do I have all my panelists? I got my production team.
Eric, where you at, man?
I think we're missing Eric.
No, I'm here. Just 1 second. 1 second.
No worries. So today we're doing a panelist discussion with all the candidates for the Orange County Sheriff's Office. I do want to also mention that all of them did agree to do this panel today. However, John Mina was not able to attend, but will pop up at next week's discussion. And we are just about ready. I actually really like doing this. I feel like I learned a lot today from each one of you about each of you guys' individual initiatives, but just overall a lot on how things work or what actually the position holds. Because sometimes when you're just the everyday person that's going to polls, like I was telling one of you, we don't know what to do. We just know that we have to click a button when we get into to the ballot. But now I want to start the panel discussion. I have Joe Lopez here with me. I have Eric McIntyre here with me. I have Andrew Darling and Daryl Shepard. So, gentlemen, the first question is, how would you rate the current state of Orange County law enforcement? And if you just want to go in order top to bottom, if that helps. I think that means, Andrew, you would be first.
All right, yeah, we've done a bunch of these things now. We usually start, alphabetical, and then we just keep going. So we're getting good at this. So simply put, Orange County's law enforcement right now is on fire. The morale is incredibly low because of the lack of leadership at the top. And because of the current situation that we're in this country, law enforcement feels that they're not being supported, and the community feels that law enforcement doesn't have their back when they're most needed. I am the only candidate that can bridge that gap. I'm not an insider. I'm not part of a 20, 30-year career in law enforcement, creating some of these problems. So that's why I believe I'm the best candidate for that. I believe I'm the only one that's going to be able to come in with those relationships in the community and build that bridge to bridge that gap, essentially. So I mean, I'm excited. I know that the other candidates are they have their version and I have my version, and I trust that August 18th I'm going to end up with the most votes.
Nice. Joe, how would you rate the current state of Orange County law enforcement?
Well, it's very obvious that what we have seen recently with the protests and everything, what happened here is we had a pressure cooker, which is ready to explode because there's been so much report and injustice when it comes to excessive use of force, nobody being held accountable, and so forth. So this was an opportunity because it resonates with everybody around the country. The Orange County Sheriff's Office has a very, very, very low morale problem, as we just saw in the recent survey, where the members over there basically voted no confidence of the current leadership of Sheriff Vida. And by reading the 46 pages of that, they don't trust him. So we got to build that relationship. And the only way that's going to be done is that you got to have effective leadership. You got to have somebody with a proven record who has no blemish, unblemished record, impeccable record, has no controversy, no skeletons, to do what? To bring that together, to bring the both groups together, who is willing to do things with people who look different from him and sound different. So I think that's what's going to take here with integrity. The 32 years that I have as a state trooper, I'm also an outsider because I'm not part of the local government here, and I travel around the state. But being here since 2005, when I moved here from Miami, I've learned a lot that this is also a very diverse community. Coming from Miami, coming from New York, I bring diversity to the Orange County Sheriff's Office, and I'm the only one with a proven history that can show that.
Nice. Thank you. And Eric, you need me to repeat the question?
I have it. Being the question is, how will I gain back the support of the union and the deputies that I will be overseeing? That's pretty simple. My job was, for many years, was to be a representative for law enforcement officers, firefighters, school teachers, and I would represent them at administrative hearings. It shows that I believe in due process and doing things the right way. I believe in the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. I believe that you cannot be charged with something or fired without due process. And that's what's going on in the sheriff's office today. They can't trust the fact that the current sheriff is not using the proper procedure as it relates to the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. And I'm all for the rights of others. I'm a real person. And we believe that there are other people that's educated enough to make decisions that would be fair to all officers, to all deputies within the law enforcement community. And that's why we have the Law Enforcement Officers Bill of Rights. So I believe that I will be able to maintain the trust of the deputies because they know that I'm a real person. And I'm not just saying that to be elected. I'm saying that because I've helped people in the communities. I've worked in communities. I know how communities can make stories up and say that there's an officer that has excessive force complaints when they really don't. When they're communities that people can say an officer has done something, and when it comes to find out, they were not being truthful. So you can't have a knee-jerk reaction when it comes down to disciplining officers. And when you look at the structure and what they were saying, there are people that's detached because they have bars and rank that they think that they have the power. The ultimate authority is the sheriff. And if the sheriff is looking at his rank and file and listening to the officers, somebody in the rank and file and administration probably needs to be adjusted and or removed to reflect the identity of the sheriff. And the identity, that will be something that I would say, look at me, I'm leading by example, and I want everyone to follow the same role, use your good judgment and common sense. And again, premeditation to a crime is a criminal act. And the likelihood of you being arrested it could be high. But let's look at all the facts and circumstances before we make any type of rash judgment.
Nice. And Daryl?
Yeah, so I know there's questions popping up. It may be a little distracting to
No worries. Yeah, I'll read it back to you. How would you rate the current state of Orange County's law enforcement?
Yeah, no, I would rate the current state as being somewhat poor. I do believe that we have some great deputies out there that are always going to do their job, and they're going to do a good job. But when it comes to the management at the top, I don't think it serves the citizens very good, and I don't think it serves the deputies. Obviously, they've come out and said so themselves. There's been so many flip-flops in this race, as well as just in law enforcement as a whole. You have John Mina, who, and Joe Lopez, I would say, who changed parties. At one point, they were Republicans, now they're Democrats, for probably the reason that Darling had mentioned with the Orange County being blue. And with Mina, you have him on camera backing up some of the excessive use of force. You look at Noel Carter and some of the other ones who just got paid out millions of dollars because of it. On one hand, he's for it, and then on the other hand, he wants to definitely with these new policies such as, if you see something, say something kind of thing, that they're going to have confidence in that. So I think that's one of the reasons why you have some issues. And then Mr. Darling, he started his campaign and then he stopped it and then he's starting it again. So, I think that can be somewhat of a flip-flop when you come, and say, hey, I'm the only one that can bridge that gap. I'm the only one, but yet we're not sure. At one point, maybe you could quit again. Who knows? I have been in the race since 2018, fighting for reform and change, and I have continued to fight. We got 190,000 votes in 2018 in that election. Unfortunately, we were just short of winning on my reform message, and all the same things that they're talking about today, I'm still talking about, and I'm still here fighting. As you can see, my record, and they've been painting me as an outsider since the day I started in 2018, and how ineligible I should be to run for office, let alone affect change. But that's just not true. I obviously don't buy into that. And, I'm still here fighting for the same things. And I'm glad that other people have come on board. I've cracked the glass ceiling for those who are non-law enforcement, and their ability to come on and take the race and take on these issues and fight for the citizens. So I applaud that at any level and at any, person who wants to put themselves out there in the same manner that I did. Probably even worse. There was a question previously about Val Demings and some of the things that she had said and other issues. But, every time I come and pay my money and say, hey, I'm still fighting for the people. I want to restore the power back to the people in which we serve. I don't need to be a law enforcement officer to know right from wrong. I don't need to be a law enforcement officer to know it's illegal. I know how to read and write. I don't need to be an attorney to know what the law is. We know, X, Y, Z. If you hit someone, it's illegal. It's a battery. I don't need a lawyer to tell me that. So I think we can apply these things in a practical way and make some real changes. But right now, the morale is low in law enforcement, and the deputies, they don't know if they're going to be backed up or if they're going to be victimized. And I can understand that. So they need someone that they can trust. I'm going to come in day one. The climate is going to be set. Improper behavior is not going to be tolerated. Other than that, I'm going to back you up. You do your job, you have 100% support from me. If you don't do your job, you're going to be held accountable. You set that kind of tone going in, there should be no question about how we're going to run this office.
Now, can you guys explain to the viewers how being an Orange County sheriff can specifically impact them as a citizen? I'm going to start with Joe.
Oh, absolutely. So, local government, local elected officials, it's talked often that when you vote, you got to vote for your local officials and make sure, because the sheriff's office does affect what you do every day, because whether it's a traffic stop, whether it's a community engagement, whether it's a positive or negative interaction, you heard most of the candidates talk about how the interaction has been very negative recently with law enforcement. So what we need to do is to work harder to make sure that there is training when it comes to de-escalating. All right, because we've seen that on TV, we've seen that on the news, and it's constantly talked about. So it's very important that the Orange County deputies and law enforcement are public officials, and they're beholden to the community and not to the establishment. So we have to work harder to make sure that we can educate the deputies. At the same time, what they need is a balanced leadership to make sure we can build that trust, building that trust with the community. At the same time, the balanced leadership, building the trust with the deputies, also at the same time to get that the support to moving forward. It's going to take a lot of emotional intelligence. Somebody who has an effective record of history of bringing people together, who has an impeccable record to do that. Mr. Shepard here talks about that he's flip-flopping and stuff like that. I just want to make something very, very clear. Look, Daryl Shepard is a very nice guy, and I spoke to him. Obviously, he's doing anything he wants to get elected. But what he's not telling you is that the Democratic Party in 2018, they denounced him, and there's a reason for that. But I just needed to go on record because he's being very desperate and saying things, attacking Andrew Darling, who's a very nice guy also, but I'm sure he'll have his words too. But thank you.
Okay. Andrew, I'll go to you next. Eric, I lost your camera. But Andrew, you go ahead. There you go, Eric, you're back. Go ahead, Andrew.
All right. Yeah, so, I mean, what was the question? Like, we're
I got you. Can you explain to viewers how being Orange County Sheriff can specifically impact them as a citizen?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first thing that you do is the entry point, the gateway to the criminal justice system is through law enforcement. Every single time. Like, so we've talked a lot on the left, as Democrats, we've talked a lot about progressive prosecutors. And we have Aramis Ayala here, and we have 4 candidates that are running for state attorney, as Aramis is not running for re-election. We talk about progressive prosecutors nationally, but every single case they get comes from law enforcement. So we can change the way that we do business by treating kids like kids. Some of the stuff I talked about individually, particularly related to arresting youth. And especially we need to make sure that we're not arresting people for misdemeanors outside of domestic violence. And there's going to be a custodial arrest for DUIs because you have to take somebody to the DUI center to do their blood or breath. But generally for misdemeanors, the policy is going to be non-arrest. And why is that? So if you commit a misdemeanor, okay, if you were in a fight and that fight's been broken up and there's no danger for future harm, you can get a ticket, a summons, or a notice to appear. If you've stolen something, in Florida last year, it changed to $750 or under is a petty theft. If you've stolen something, and let's not use the excuse of, well, I was stealing food for my family, right? I don't care if it was food. I don't care if it was a $500 TV that you were trying to wheel out of some big box store, okay? If you were caught, you should absolutely be trespassed from that store, and you should absolutely have to face the ramifications for those choices. But you don't have to go to jail for that. You don't have to sit in jail, and if you can't bond out, then you're sitting there for 2 or 3 days. And we all know, we've all had regular jobs at some point where two no-call, no-shows, and you're fired. You don't have a job anymore. So The system is what is, digging deeper and deeper and causing people more and more harm, not just their mistakes, which they absolutely will still have to pay for with a ticket, summons, or a notice to appear. So reforming the way we think about policing, bringing more social workers in, bringing more mental health professionals, having them go as first responders with the support of the deputies so that the people who have the degrees, who have the professional experience are the ones talking to people in mental health crisis, are the ones that are talking to folks who, may be in withdrawal from their, from their addiction. Like there are professionals that we need to have having those conversations. And then just briefly what Daryl was talking about, Daryl Shepard was the Democratic nominee in 2018. He had every single advantage that you could ask for in a race against 2 non-party affiliated candidates, and he didn't win. So I'm the only candidate here who's ever been in a race for sheriff and qualified and hasn't lost to somebody else. So Eric was in 2018, but he didn't qualify. He decided to push it off until 2020. But Joe and Daryl already lost to Sheriff Mina. I am the outsider that is going to come in and beat Sheriff Mina and be the next sheriff of Orange County.
Now, Eric, can you hear me, Eric?
Yes, please, if you would, just repeat the question so I can stay on target, please. Thank you.
Can you explain to the viewers how being Orange County Sheriff can specifically impact them as a citizen?
I would think that when I'm Orange County Sheriff, I want to bring community policing back to our community. And you and I know, as I spoke a little earlier during the previous interview, that When you put people in the neighborhoods, it's going to build trust. If you continually have officers either walking the streets or getting out of their cars, it's going to build relationships. What you will also find is, as sheriff, you have the ability to allow persons to absorb the type of personality and the type of inner feelings and emotions that you want to relate to them, so they'll understand. Many of these deputies have families, and they know what it's like to be treated, how they want their family to be treated, and how they want the people in the community to be treated. And I believe that if we follow the model of treat everyone like you want to be treated, and they understand that with much to much is given, much is required. And if they love their job, they're going to do what is required. They chose the job. And as choosers of jobs, you can always leave. And if not, you get help. Walmart doesn't play when it comes to smiling and customer service. You can frown up all you want, and that's just enough for you to be terminated. And they have job descriptions, and I would want our deputies to follow their job description. As it relates to me and wanting to bring the community together, I want to be able to send scouts out to neighborhoods, regardless of the neighborhood. That will be the Hispanic communities, the Caribbean communities, and let's learn a little bit more about their culture. Let's learn what has happened in the past and how we can help rebuild relationships with our communities. And just for information purposes, please, if anyone wants to know the answers as to why I didn't run last time, please just ask. But I'm pretty sure it's not that easy. But just for the record, that is not the reason why. And regardless of what happened in the past is not necessarily going to repeat itself. Okay, because now we have viable candidates in the race. We have intelligent professional candidates in the race. We have people that want to do the best thing. We have people with great ideas. And we want the people of Orange County to do their research and learn about each and every candidate and why they should choose a candidate without law enforcement, or regardless of what their choices are. But we can't allow for each other to continue to point fingers as to what another candidate is doing or not doing. We just have to come together and make unity in our community. And men must always pray. So I'm gonna pray and put God in this organization, and I'm gonna pray whether nobody else prays, and we're gonna see how this thing turns out. So I can't wait to be sheriff, and I will treat everyone the same.
Nice. Daryl, the question is, can you explain to viewers how being Orange County Sheriff can specifically impact them as a citizen?
Yeah, so the sheriff is a policy position. It definitely shapes the direction of how we enforce the law. As we all know, or should know, officers and deputies have discretion when they make an arrest, especially when it comes to misdemeanor arrests. So, determining whether or not to make that arrest, looking at the decriminalization of drugs such as marijuana, and allowing for them to be treated as, conditions of mental health as opposed to criminal behavior. Those kind of policies will directly affect the citizens of Orange County, and those are policies that are shaped by the sheriff's office and working closely with the district attorney or state attorney's office as well. Looking at over-policing in Black neighborhoods, and addressing that. Do we need that kind of police response? Are there other ways that we can accomplish the same goals if we're looking for compliance and other things, or what other issues that the citizens in those communities bring to us, and we can sit down and work together and figure out some solutions other than trying to arrest everyone that comes outside in the Black neighborhood, or trying to find a violation, whether it's a tag violation or, tail light, and then, escalating something like that into a situation like Mr. Floyd's or other. We want to avoid that kind of response if at all necessary. My policy is clearly, an arrest is one tool in law enforcement. It should be used as a last resort, not a first resort. I want to make sure that people have jobs and stay out of jail. I want to defund the militarization of police and defund the incentives that, there seems to be as, hey, this is a easy to deal with problem. I can just stay in jail, and not really be conscious of the long-term effects of arresting someone. So, you take my case, and for example, Andrew Darling, mentioned that, I had all things working in my favor in the last campaign. Number one, I was the only Democrat to step up to the plate to challenge John Mena. Anybody else, including himself, was of age and could have ran if they disagreed with my policies in my campaign. I did receive the Democratic nomination, but it was not an elected situation where I needed permission from some people in the Democratic Party who disagreed with my running. Obviously, if he feels like all the challenges and the negative comments and, all the demeaning types of behavior that was coming from even people in my own party. So Joe reiterated that I was definitely considered an outsider, so much so to the point they wanted to throw me outside of my own party. So that shows you that they do not want someone like me that can affect change, that believes in them, that is not going to take a label and let that determine my future and my impact on the citizens and on the change that's needed today. So it's not going to, it didn't affect me then. It didn't make me quit then, despite people calling for me to quit. And it's not going to make me quit now. I was the first candidate to try to change the system. I stood up when no one else would, and I'm going to continue to stand up for the things I believe in.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all you gentlemen for tapping in with us today here at Parade to the Polls. I want to make sure that when we are done with this live, it will be posted and there's comments coming in still continuously. So for all of you to go in there, check out some of those comments and questions and answer them accordingly. And we want to just keep pushing everybody to know about different offices and things that are running, so that way we can get out the information best as possible. So I want to thank all of you all. I want to thank all of you for stopping by today virtually and chatting with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you very much.
And don't forget, send us your pledge. We need those videos so we can post them.
Okay.
I can take care of that today.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, guys.
All right, y'all have a good one.
Bonsoir.
Bonsoir.